Going.
Okay, recording has started.
Hello and welcome to the Hyperledger Technical Steering Committee meeting. Everybody's welcome to participate in this meeting and all of our technical meetings at Hyperledger. Please abide by our community code of conduct and be respectful of the other participants here, and also abide by the antitrust policy. We've got a couple announcements. I guess one that fell off the radar from last time is the Brazil boot camp in Sao Paulo. And if you are looking to help get that boot camp underway, please reach out to the community architects there. I guess is probably the simplest way to put that, and we can get a link up with the right contacts there after the fact. Next thing is the governing board has a meeting coming up at the end of July, and we would like to have ahead of that time any thoughts from the technical community on things that we need support with in the coming year. So I've put up a table for you to add comments to. You can add things that might be budgetary in nature, like the CI discussion that we have underway, or they could be policy in nature or priority. But please put some thought into whatever it is that you might add to that list so that we understand the rationale for it and include a follow-up contact for us. And all that should be on the table. I will send a note to the mailing list later today. And looks like Dave just add something for the Fabric security audit.
Yeah, so as part of the security program we have here, when we do major releases, we will redo audits, and with Hyperledger Fabric going to 1.4.1 and 2.0, that met the threshold of doing another security audit, and that has begun as of Monday. So if you're curious, contact me. I can kind of loop you into some of the details, but we will have the report probably in about a month or so. I think we're scheduled to get it at the end of July. Yeah, so just over a month and a half, 2 months. So anyway, just wanted to announce that, let you know that things are moving.
All right, thanks, Dave. All right, Convector Task Force. Rye, is that your item?
It is. I just calling again for people to join. I have Sean joined. Thank you. We want to do an evaluation of the code base and see that where this comes in. And the presentation walking through is there's a link and there's the GitHub repo. Please sign up if you're interested. Composer is a great on-ramp to our community, and you know, if Convector can serve that role, then I think it would be a worthy addition and a good thing to spend time on. Thank you.
So I did take a brief look at it. I haven't had a chance to fully evaluate it. I would be most comfortable with this project being proposed through the normal proposal guidelines. I don't think we have any precedence for one code base supplanting the code base of an existing project, and that feels awkward to me.
So I'm not sure that's exactly the right positioning, though. I mean, there is some overlap in the intent. So I was actually sponsor of the lab, and so I looked at that earlier on, and but you know, I don't claim to be an expert in it at all, just so that everybody understands. But from the positioning at the time, when Composer was still actually up and going, and you know, in a bigger way, I would say, than it is today, they explained to me that the motivation was they felt that Composer was creating an additional layer above Fabric that was in a way too isolated and too disconnected, and so they had taken a different approach, which was to really extend Fabric, but in a much more like native way, I would say. and it's not that different from the new approach that that Fabric has been taking now, but so there is maybe more of an overlap in that way, and but the fact that they perceived that Composer was losing speed, motivated them to bring it to Hyperledger. So I don't know that they necessarily claim to be a replacement of Composer per se, for that matter.
Are both of these only Fabric related? I know Composer is. I haven't really looked at Convector yet, but maybe we should really decide on the project versus sub-project decisions first, and then if they're only Fabric related, go that way.
Yeah, the question that keeps popping up. But I believe it is Fabric specific. I don't know if there is,
it only makes mention
of some pieces
in the presentation. But
I see that Alice has a comment or question.
Yeah, hi. I would just like to add to this point and remind everyone that at some point last year you were having a discussion with Brian and some other people that tools that are not architecturally supporting all the platforms should probably be moved to the project itself, and those that are advertised as cross-platform tools should architecturally support all the platforms, meaning that conceptually they shouldn't be tied to any specific platform, in this case Fabric. And then I understand that over time there might be plugins, let's call them plugins, for one platform but not for another, but at least architecturally they should be open to all the platforms that are under the Hyperledger branding.
And Dan, I think Chris was trying to get in there too.
I got to get the door. I'll be back.
Something else that maybe we could direct that community to is and see if there's synergies there.
You dropped out there, Dan.
I was suggesting that that community could also take a look at Transact and see if there's synergies with that project. And that might help round out their thinking of how they propose this project or fold underneath Fabric or their
Okay.
architectural approach technically.
Okay.
Let me make just a case in favor of the idea that if you have a project that starts out, it's given a given name like Composer, and it goes down a certain path, and the teams decide, hey, there's actually a different code base we might want to start with. Let's call it a 2.0. Very different, different code, but still the same in kind of large scale intent, right? That it probably is not a bad thing for that to happen, right? Whether the Convector team wants to be thought of as Composer 2.0 is another question. If they would rather that the project was called or even changed from Composer to Convector, that's great. That's in fact another option for us to consider. I think we've just built a lot of public awareness of this idea that there's a product called Composer, which is intended to be the first tool that you might use when getting involved with Hyperledger technologies. And it'd be a shame to throw that kind of brand equity away, although I hate those kinds of terms. Just because it's a different code base. If the intent is the same, and if the people around the first code base are happy to kind of transfer that public awareness to the second project.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, I have to say. I don't know if they are open to that. I mean, it would require both sides to be open to it, right? The existing Composer community and the convector community or group.
Yes, absolutely.
So
But
let me
I
just
agree.
outline what I think you were saying there. We would, move the current Composer code bases. I think they have like 8 repos over to the Hyperledger archives organization, and then bring in the Convector code base and rename it as Composer, and then move forward. Is something mechanically like that?
I mean, you could do that. You could keep them the same repo and have it be. I mean, the history is there, so you don't need to have that kind of cliff, right?
Well, so the Composer team did sort of commit to supporting Composer for Fabric 1.x. And I believe they've, sort of kept that commitment. Again, no new development, but make sure that it works.
I thought it was through 1.3 rather than through 1.4.
Could be. I thought it was 1.x, but
I think it's 1.2 actually.
is it 1.2? Well, I don't remember the note. I don't remember what said in the note.
But I think maybe the intent that you're getting to there is if the Composer project still has active maintainers, it should be up to them whether or not their code base gets.
Yeah, and so we could ask. I don't know that there's any. I mean, we don't have any plans to take it forward, right? And if there's others in the community like Dan or others who were involved, I think again Dan has sort of moved on and his focus is on the clause tooling and so forth. And if there's people that want to come in and take essentially the mantle of what Composer was about and drive that, I'm all for it. That I think that's fine. But again, I do think that the decision should be one not that we make, but that the project team, so the Composer team would have to sort of buy into. We can sort of ratify it, I suspect, but I don't think that the TSC should be imposing projects on other projects, so to speak.
Right, I agree. So another avenue for this work to come forward is as its own project proposal.
Well, I think Alish's point should be considered, and what Mick was saying, or not Mick, Mark was saying earlier, that maybe we should figure out what a sub-project versus a project means, because we have ruled multiple times, or the TSC has ruled multiple times, that if it's a single platform, maybe it shouldn't be its own standalone project.
Yeah, so on that front, I have to say, I see on their page that they claim to be, or they aim to be agnostic, but as far as I know, they are not at all today. So I don't know if it's another case of, well, they could be, they just aren't right now, and on that basis, they claim they could be the top level project.
I don't think we should bottleneck progress on Composer and Convector with this issue, because we do need to resolve this issue. Meanwhile, Grid right now only supports Sawtooth, so we've said yes to projects that are based on one framework, and that's fine. Let's consider this separately. And I think the point is valid. Like, the next step should probably be to ask the Convector team and the Composer teams to potentially talk with each other and see if there's something interesting there that they want to do, and if not, for the Convector team and for Arno and you as the sponsor to consider if and when the time is right, if the time is now, for it to be proposed as its own project. Mm-hmm. And then the TSC can take that and consider this question of sub-project or not.
Which I think should still be a consideration. There's things with Grid, for example, where Grid's intended to work at this point with Transact, and that would facilitate other platforms being able to make use of that same WebAssembly code. So there's different shades of gray in this multi-platform question. Okay, sounds like we've run to a natural conclusion of that discussion at this point. Next on the agenda, we have some naming guidelines that went out very recently on the mailing list. Brian, would you like to introduce those?
Yeah, and this is not intended to draw a lot of conversation here. Yeah, because it's we'd like to get in the practice of posting things to the TSC mailing list, giving folks enough head up, time ideally to read it before commenting here, and then plenty more time before being asked to approve anything. But I just there's some conversation about with new projects coming in. How much do we want to try to standardize, or when it comes to coming up with names for those projects? And I think everyone's still pretty in agreement that really the names are something that the developers themselves, the people proposing the projects, really kind of own and have to be passionate about. It can't be imposed upon them. But we thought it'd be worth at least articulating some of the informal stuff that goes on when people do look at names and think about names, or the things that they should be considering. And I don't, and so the idea was put those in some documents and maybe get convergence on that, an agreement by the technical steering committee and the marketing committee. Actually, a lot of that work, that's not my work. A lot of it was Meredith Bennett and Dana Prey and Alyssa Worley from the marketing committee. So the idea was to get some input. They're not that complex, but and so hopefully they could be iterated and improved on in the next week or week after that, improved on and approved in the next few weeks. And likewise over the marketing committee, they're kind of drawing other feedback and that sort of thing. I think there is a resistance as well to saying there is a particular theme, be it around signs of the zodiac, or which was kind of been a trend, or the greenhouse metaphor, or anything like that. There's still some niceness, to something to appreciate about the quirkiness of our current diversity of different names. But at the same time, we just want to make sure that as projects come in, they've done the Google searches, maybe even the trademark searches, that sort of thing. So those documents are there. Happy to take a few minutes to talk about them here, at least the rationale behind them, and then take feedback over the list or directly.
I have a couple of feedback. In general, I think is a good idea. Practically speaking, I'm not sure we should name a specific search engines over any other. People should search. And the other is in the best practices document, there's one point which seems, so it says, the name should give people some understanding of what the technology does or how people can use it. I would claim that pretty much none of the names we have today meet that criteria. And I think it's pretty much impossible to accommodate that and the other one which says don't go for something that's too geeky or something along those lines.
Those recommendations are definitely at tension with each other. I think
yes.
I think Transact and Composer are actually good examples along those two lines. But your point is well taken. No, these are going to conflict, and that's good art. Good art comes out of conflict, I think. Yeah, it's not an algorithm so much as guidelines.
Yeah, I'm concerned that it's not specific enough to avoid some of the unclear discussions that have happened on earlier names. For example, if a project was proposed called blockchain, that might be very descriptive of what it's trying to do, but I don't think any of us would think that's a good name. And then sort of underscoring
why?
the last point, Ursa doesn't fit in very well to a descriptive name, but it's otherwise highlighted here as a good general name. So I almost feel like this needs to get kicked back to the marketing committee to get more specific.
The other thing that I would find really helpful when we tried to set up Aries is pointing out who to go talk to and who to schedule to get support or help. The other thing that I think would be good in the branding guidelines is what to do if someone sends a complaint about a name, like a trademark complaint or a copyright complaint. And that will help people when they establish the original project to know what the process is for that sort of thing.
That's great feedback. Meredith is on the call, so she'll be kind of incorporating other people, kind of feedback from both communities, I think. And Meredith, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, and thank you guys for the feedback. All the points are duly noted. They make sense. And yeah, just if anything else comes up, please feel free to comment back. I'll be keeping a close watch on both of these articles here. And if you would rather reach out to me to discuss live, I'm very happy to do that. And so yeah, we have a marketing committee call on Tuesday. So I'll be sharing this with the team there. We'll be combining the feedback that they have along with the feedback here today, and we'll get a next iteration out before the next TSC call.
I have another comment on about naming. Is that my number one concern about naming something, especially in English, is that it's hard to imagine the sound, the similar sound in other language or culture. That it might be bad. It might not be the right sound for the people or the language in that area. So I'm not sure how to address that. Is there such a tool or body or forum that one would post a potential name and ask, Google, but Google is hit and miss, so it's not really.
No, right. I mean, cultural sensitivity. I mean, it's like when Chevy had the Nova, the Chevy Nova. I mean, that's a cool name in the U.S., but in Mexico it meant doesn't go. Right?
Yeah.
So not the best name, right? And I think Bawa, actually, there was somebody was considering some name, and I think Bawa said, "Oh, that means something very different in Chinese, and we probably don't want to do that." So I think, or maybe it was in relation to a color, but that said, I totally agree, Ben, that we want to be adding into the best practices the sort of the cultural sensitivity, because we are trying to appeal sort of globally. But that, I think, is something for the marketing committee to concern themselves with. The one thing I did want to sort of push back on is because the guidance itself doesn't really mesh with either any of the names we have, or even going forward with the other guidance, and that is that the name should be, what is the actual quote here? The name should give people some understanding of what the technology does and or how people can use it. Just give, I think having sort of the generic sort of descriptive name is exactly the opposite of what we want. We want something that's catchy and memorable, and not blockchain or composer or whatever, because those are boring.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of your points, Chris. The first one, I think it's
Hey, Sean, your dog's pretty loud there.
yeah, not my dog. I think like the role that the marketing committee can play here, which would be like really strong, is to like the projects are going to come up with a name that they like, and there's a lot of debate in that process and stuff like that. But the marketing committee can really go through and have an internal process of doing the checks with kind of in an international way, right? Like making sure that it's appropriate overall, and if not, like getting that information back to the project team. Because if the project team knows those things, they'll probably be like, "Oh, we didn't know." But also like legal checks, like looking for other open source projects, like all of that stuff. I think the marketing committee should basically serve as a central place that like can consistently like apply a procedure to identify things that the project team might not have identified.
Makes sense. Okay, well, I think Meredith and I will take these things back, and certainly invite folks to leave comments on these two documents as well, and we'll version them here so you can see updates to them, and we'll bring it back when we think it's ready for either further comment or for approval.
Thank you all.
Okay. I just added the Sao Paulo comment to the top of the agenda. Karen had previously been listed as the contact for that, and probably is a good idea to loop in the community architects. But if any of you feel like you want to redirect who gets those notices, feel free to update that agenda item there. Okay, the only other agenda item that we have is working group updates. It came in pretty late. I have not had a chance to review it. It looks like about half the group hasn't, so I'd rather we defer to next week if there's any questions about that. We have
hi, Dan. I'm here for the smart contracts working group. If there are any questions, I can answer them now, or no problem to move it to the next meeting. It's up to you.
Okay. Do any TSC members have any immediate questions that have had a chance to review that?
I just got off a plane last night, so I am not caught up.
Okay. I am not either.
Yeah.
And not hearing anybody else step forward with questions, I just like to ask that that contributor return next week for Q&A. And who was that, by the way?
It's me, Sofia Terzi.
All right, well, thank you for coming today, and if you can make it next week, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank you. Okay, since we have a substantial amount of time left, I would like to offer this up to the subcommittees that we have formed to split out separately during this remaining time that we have. Arnaud, I don't know if you want to try to wrangle your group together or any of the others who have subcommittees here and splinter off into your own mechanisms of communication to make use of time that people already have allocated here. And if that's too sudden of notice for people, then I will just give you that 30 minutes back to do with as you need.
Hey, Dan?
Yeah.
Can we mention the two-factor thing?
Oh, yeah. We were, I think, going to have some sort of formalized statement about that in a vote, but I don't think we have that statement yet.
Sure.
No, I think somebody had actually done a little bit of research. I had said we could probably figure it out, but I guess it's not even visible. I thought it was for some reason, but
So I have an audit. I did an audit of everyone in the Hyperledger org, and it is just very slightly less than 50% of the approximately 400 people have two-factor auth turned on. What I cannot do, or I haven't figured out, so I turn to the wisdom of the crowd. I cannot seem to turn a GitHub ID into an email address in a commit log.
Right.
So I can't figure out who, without going through and looking at every contributor's webpage to see if they have contributed to the project. I don't know that there's a way to figure out if these are active or not.
Right, and there's no way to check on a commit either if they're. I mean, I think you can prevent it, but that means booting everybody.
Right.
Which is not good.
Hey, Rai. This is
Tracy.
Tracy. You might want to look at the Community Management Lab and specifically the Git contributors shell script, because it does use the commit logs and allows you to get an email address out of the commit log using Git logs.
Right.
So that might be a mechanism that you could use to match up the user IDs to the email addresses.
Okay, I'll take a look.
I'm not sure which direction you're looking to go, so it might not be, but I think there might be a way.
So what I have is a list of GitHub IDs, and I don't want to publish it because then it would tell everybody who the users are who don't have two-factor auth enabled, right?
Sure.
But there's about 200 of them. And I tried to figure out a way by taking email addresses for accounts that I know, like my other account. And I disabled 2FA on it, and I posted in the the email address for that account, and it doesn't show up with the GitHub ID. When you post in an email address, what I got was invite this email address. It didn't say invite this GitHub ID. So that was the piece I'm trying to figure out. But I will take a look, and I'm open to any input on how to turn email addresses into GitHub IDs.
I mean, one thing that I think wouldn't hurt at all, in fact, it would be a good idea, would be to, sort of spam the various project lists and, sort of Hyperledger announce. It says, look, it's really important that everybody get two-factor auth so we aren't getting hacked and so forth. And say that at some point in time, we may actually boot you from the org if you're not. Just give people fair warning.
So what does happen if you turn two-factor authentication enforcement on? People can't...
All the people that don't have it, which is slightly over half of our org, will be removed from the organization.
Okay,
Right.
but that wouldn't actually prevent somebody from issuing a pull request?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, in other projects I've been in, it just makes it hard to assign issues or pull requests to people because only people who are in the organization usually show up on those lists to assign pull requests.
Yeah, but it would be awkward to do it, and I do think we should avoid, something like that. But you can, sending a note and saying, "Hey, please do this," and take another audit, in a month or so, and see how well that that response has been. I have the same problem with the IBM org, right? And I get all the emails, and I match up things and go through the process of asking people to do it, and they're still doing it.
Well, okay, so there's a meta question here, right, that I think I did ask, and that is when we started the Hyperledger GitHub org, we accepted anybody, right? Yeah. Anyone that said, I want to have a Hyperledger badge on my profile, we accepted. And if we click the button, is the marketing piece for us no longer that important? Because that's another benefit that we get out of this.
Yeah, I agree with that, right? Like, if it isn't that important for marketing, I think we should do what's right for security. I was also wondering if we could throw up a little script. I wonder if there's a way to do it on GitHub, not necessarily in the Git commits, but on GitHub, where we can check to see if someone has 2FA enabled and like annoy them through the GitHub system.
Well,
turn it on.
I thought about that. What I did was I formed a secret group called No 2FA, and I was going to try to invite everyone to it that didn't have their 2FA enabled, so then I could send messages to the group. But I decided against it because I don't want to. I mean, that's exactly the behavior GitHub tells you not to do.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
But I agree with Chris. I think we're thinking this thing. We should give people enough warning and then pull the trigger. I mean, and in between, we could do an assessment, as Chris was suggesting. Before we pull the trigger, we can say, okay, now we've given a fair warning, clear indication to everybody. This is what we intend to do. And based on what the assessment reveals, we can decide, okay, do we want to live with the consequences, or is it okay to just go ahead and do it?
Yeah. You can also @ the org. Did you know that? So you can just, open an issue and just @ them.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
So they all get the message that way.
Right. Well, the trouble is that if you don't actually link your email and accept email notifications, it just goes to the GitHub, notification page, and many people don't even go there. Right.
Yeah, but
Right.
I mean, at some point, if people don't want to communicate, well, then.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that's fine.
you can,
Okay, I think we're pretty deep into the weeds on this. So Rye, if you wouldn't mind for next meeting, just having something to say, we're gonna give notice for a certain period of time, and then we're gonna turn it on after a certain period of time, and whatever audits you want to do, and just have that framed up in a couple sentences. Then we can just explicitly vote on that if that satisfies people.
Sounds good to me.
Excellent. All right, any other late breaking agenda items for anyone? Going once, going twice. All right, this meeting is at a close. Thank you, everyone.
thanks.